breakfast call dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hey, this is Arlene.
This is Grace.
And of course, we are proceeding to our third segment of today, the ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue. We are going to talk about the future of West Papua under Jokowi. A few weeks ago, we did cover on West Papua a bit about the freedom movement there and the kind of situation that is happening on the ground. But today, we are fortunate to have a diplomatic representative from West Papua to share with us his view on the situation there.
So definitely we get to have a more deeper insights into what has happened.
Deeper insights, definitely. Yes. And we have in the studio is Maurits Menufandu. I hope I pronounced the name right. He's a national committee member of Biak. He's here for a diplomatic mission.
Hello.
Apa kabar?
Hello. Baik.
Yeah. Selamat pagi. Due to language limitation, we have a translator from Dignity International. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you.
And of course, we have Adrian Pereira. We interviewed him before on ASEAN Youth. He's the program coordinator at Dignity International as well.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
So good morning. I bet you have your good breakfast.
Ready to share our experiences.
So let's start about your background first. Before we proceed to the history of West Papua, maybe a bit of explanation on his background as the National Committee member of Biak.
Ya, saya sebagai salah satu anggota Komite Nasional Papua Barat, wilayah Biak Numfor, urusan luar negeri atau diplomasi.
Sudah berapa lama? Since when he started?
Dari bila?
Secara organisasi saya sudah ditunjuk sudah kurang lebih 2 tahun, tetapi mulai 1 bulan terakhir yang saya mulai lakukan kunjungan ke ASEAN, khususnya di KL untuk melakukan diplomasi tentang isu hak asasi manusia di Papua Barat.
Okay, it's been 1.5 years, but basically the last 1 month I've been doing this diplomatic mission, starting with KL.
So the first question of today regarding on West Papua is about the history of the West Papua conflict, especially post-Indonesia independence, since the reign of Sukarno until now. What was the situation back then?
Ya, jadi pada tanggal 1 Desember tahun 1961, bangsa Papua sudah mendeklarasikan kemerdekaan Papua Barat dengan atribut negara sebagai berikut. Nama negara Papua Barat, bendera, bintang kejora, lagu kebangsaan, Hai Tanahku Papua, lambang negara burung mamruk. Dalam pengakuan kerajaan Belanda sebagai negara yang menduduki Papua Barat pada waktu itu.
On December 1st, 1961, the nation Papua declared independent as West Papua with the following attribute. Country name as a Republic of West Papua, and the flag is the Morning Star, and national song, Oh My Land Papua, and the state code is Victoria Crown Pigeon in recognition of the Kingdom of Netherlands as a country occupying West Papua.
Tapi kemerdekaan yang diproklamasikan hanya berjalan 19 hari. Karena pada tanggal 19 Desember 1961, Presiden Soekarno mengumumkan Tri Komando Rakyat atau yang Trikora, yang salah satunya berbunyi, gagalkan pembentukan negara Papua Barat. Maka pecahlah pertikaian antara Belanda dan Indonesia.
But the independence is proclaimed only went for 19 days, because on December 1961, President Sukarno announced the Three Command of the People, which is called Trikora, and one of which reads cancellation of establishment of the state of West Papua, and hence dispute broke out between Netherlands and Indonesia.
Namun melalui tekanan dari negara adidaya Amerika pada tanggal 1 Oktober 1962, pemerintah Belanda menyerahkan Papua Barat ke Perserikatan Bangsa-Bangsa melalui Juntea hingga 1 Mei 1963.
However, through the pressure of the superpower America on October 1st, 1962, the Dutch handed over West Papua to the United Nations through the United Nations Temporary Executive Authority until May 1st, 1963.
Selanjutnya, PBB merancang kesepakatan yang disebut New Agreement untuk memberikan kesempatan bagi orang Papua untuk memilih merdeka penuh atau bergabung dengan Indonesia melalui suatu referendum sesuai dengan mekanisme internasional One Man, One Vote.
Further, the UN hampered out a deal called the New York Agreement to provide an opportunity for the Papuan people to be able to choose whether a full independence or join with Indonesia through a referendum in accordance with the international mechanism, One Man, One Vote.
Namun proses referendum diganti oleh Indonesia sesuai dengan mekanisme Indonesia dan dinamakan penentuan pendapat rakyat atau Pereira sesuai dengan aturan Indonesia, dan yang lebih tidak manusiawi dilakukan di bawah tekanan militer. Memang tidak adil karena hanya melibatkan 1.025 orang Papua dari 800.000 orang Papua pada saat itu. Mereka mengintimidasi warga Papua dan harus memilih untuk bergabung dengan Indonesia. Jika tidak, akan dibunuh.
But the referendum process is replaced by Indonesian in accordance with Indonesian mechanism and named as a determination of the opinion of the people or Pereira in accordance with the rules of Indonesia, and more inhumanly done under the military pressure. It is unfair because it's involved only 1,025 Papuans from 800,000 Papuans at that time, and this is carried out under the pressure of the Indonesian military to intimidate Papuans must choose to join Indonesia, otherwise they will be killed.
Dalam laporan sidang tahunan PBB, Bolivia Ortizan mengajukan suatu makalah kepada Majelis Umum PBB yang berisi mayoritas rakyat Papua menginginkan kemerdekaan atau 99% dari masyarakat adat Papua ingin bebas. Tapi Amerika Serikat dan delegasi dari Indonesia tidak menerima dan tidak merespon apa-apa tentang makalah itu. Sebagai hasil dari konspirasi politik antara Indonesia, Amerika Serikat, Belanda, dan PBB menyebabkan telah terjadi operasi militer Indonesia dan intelijen secara sistematis menghancurkan rakyat Papua.
In the report of the annual session of the UN, Bolivia Ortizan filed a paper to the UN General Assembly with the content that the majority of the Papuan want independence, or 99% of the indigenous Papuan people want to be free. But the United States and the delegation of Indonesia did not accept and does not respond to anything on the paper. As a result of a political conspiracy between Indonesia, the United States and Netherlands and the UN, there has been an Indonesian military operation and intelligence systematically destroyed the Papuan people.
Pembunuhan, penculikan, pemerkosaan, penyiksaan warga Papua dilegalkan selama kurang lebih 50 tahun. Eksploitasi sumber daya alam dan transmigrasi, hasil hutan, laut, dan pertambangan digarap, ditambah alasan pemerintahan penduduk, ribuan orang dipindahkan dari Jawa ke Papua lewat transmigrasi.
Murder, kidnapping, rape, torture of Papuan people legalized for over 50 years. Exploitation of natural resources and transmigration, forest products, marine and mining was exploited, and add on to the reason with the population distribution, thousands of people from Java moved to Papua through the transmigration process.
Sementara orang Papua terus diabaikan, dilupakan, dan miskin di atas tanah mereka sendiri. Akibatnya, setelah 51 tahun, dari tahun 1963 sampai 2012, Papua tercatat sebagai manusia termiskin di Indonesia, yang tidak dapat diterima dengan akal sehat karena Papua dikenal sebagai pulau terkaya di Indonesia dan jagat raya, tapi penduduknya hidup dalam kemiskinan.
While Papuan continue to be ignored, forgotten, and poor in their own land, hence after 51 years since 1963 until 2012, Papuan are listed as the poorest in Indonesia. And this is unacceptable in common sense because Papua is known as the richest highland in Indonesia and in the universe, but the population lives in poverty.
Okay, that is a very long history. It seems like it's been quite, a long time since post-independence that West Papuans especially are being neglected. So when did this national committee member of Biak started, and what is the purpose of, forming this diplomatic mission, spreading these stories about the issues in West Papua?
Ya, kami mewakili rakyat Papua Barat untuk melakukan misi diplomatik ke negara-negara ASEAN dalam rangka mencari dukungan dari negara-negara ASEAN untuk mengangkat isu-isu pelanggaran hak asasi manusia di Papua dan terutama penentuan nasib sendiri.
Bila diplomatic committee itu ditubuhkan?
Ya.
Sejak bila?
Komite Nasional Papua Barat lahir beberapa tahun yang lalu dan dia tumbuh dari rakyat dan dia berjuang untuk kebebasan di Papua Barat.
So basically it started few years ago, and the reason behind this diplomatic mission and the background is we represent the people of West Papua to conduct diplomatic mission to ASEAN countries in order to seek the support of the ASEAN countries to bring up the issue of human rights violation in Papua and also self-determination.
So, do Papuans want the freedom from Indonesia itself?
Freedom and independence.
Ya, orang Papua sendiri menyadari bahwa sejak kehadiran kekuasaan asing di Papua Barat, mereka sudah menolak dan mereka akan berjuang sampai tidak ada kekuasaan asing di Papua Barat.
Yes, the people of Papua realize by themselves since the presence of the foreign power, and they reject the foreign power in West Papua, and they will fight until there's no foreign power in West Papua.
Okay, so I want to know, what are the human costs of the bloody conflicts in Papua since post-Indonesia independence? Like, how many people actually died from this and being tortured or being imprisoned?
Ya, telah terjadi pelanggaran hak asasi manusia di Papua kurang lebih 50 tahun dan dilegalkan oleh negara.
Mm-hmm.
Tapi berapa orang yang dibunuh atau ditorture atau dipenjarakan?
Dan dari data dari berbagai NGO dan juga laporan-laporan dari masyarakat adat, kurang lebih 100,000 orang Papua telah dibantai sejak integrasi ke Indonesia dari tahun 1963 sampai saat ini.
Mm. Because we are talking about human rights and the cost of human lives here, I want to ask Adrian Pereira, who has been quite silent just now. I want to know, is it quite common in Southeast Asia, in particular Indonesia, for the regime or the government to go against separatist group and eventually kill a lot of people in order for the nation to be able to integrate it as one nation?
Indonesia has quite a dark history in terms of the question you just asked. If you look back at the history of Timor-Leste, which had its opportunity to break free under President Gus Dur sometime more than 10 years ago.
Early
So,
2000.
Yeah, so if you look at that history, the number of deaths basically caused in the struggle, and I think it was a few 100,000. And I think until today, many of the generals involved have not been charged or taken to task. So I think in terms of impunity, it's quite very dark and bad human rights record.
Mm-hmm. Just wondering, like when it comes to West Papua, is it culturally and socio-economically different from Indonesia? Because I remember earlier on you mentioned West Papua or Papua is the poorest region within the Indonesia region.
Ya, budaya dan sosial ekonomi orang Papua sangat berbeda dari daerah-daerah lain di Indonesia.
Berbeda tahap bagaimana kompleksiti perbezaannya?
Yang pertama ialah ras, mereka ras Melayu, West Papua ras Melanesia. Itu salah satu contoh perbedaan yang sangat unik.
You want to add on, Anne?
Add on.
Translate.
The translation, okay. Yes, culturally and socio-economic people of Papua are very different from other region in Indonesia, and also by ethnicity, the Indonesian are from the Malay ethnicity, and the Papuans are from Melanesia.
Mm-hmm. So that is, I mean, that because of that, physically they look different as well. If you want to talk about, like, in terms of the physical difference, socio-economically, they are poorer, much more poorer than the rest of Indonesians. So, what? I mean, just to further asking the question about socio-economy. So, is this the main reason for them to seek for independence for their nation?
Dari segi ekonomi itu memang nampak, dari segi ekonomi memang miskin orang Papua. Jadi adakah ini alasan untuk orang Papua untuk kemerdekaan?
Ya, memang secara kenyataan yang ada sejak integrasi 63 sampai sekarang 2014, orang Papua masih hidup di dalam kemiskinan. Tetapi hidup dalam kemiskinan bukan menjadi satu alasan untuk Papua harus merdeka. Tetapi secara hak asasi manusia, secara sejarah, orang Papua merupakan satu bangsa yang ingin merdeka, duduk sama rendah dan berdiri sama tinggi dengan bangsa-bangsa lain di dunia.
Okay. Yes, from the integration time, the Papuan people lives in poverty, but this is not the reason for seeking for independence. But basically, by ethnic wise, the Papuan people, being a different, they want the independence and to live in dignity as a Papuan people itself.
Mm-hmm. So, throughout this year, since independence until now, prior to Jokowi's reign, I'm just wondering, has the Indonesian government really addressed the human rights issue in Papua, like in any way possible?
Ya, tidak. Sampai sekarang ini banyak kasus pelanggaran hak asasi manusia di Papua yang tidak diselesaikan oleh negara. Sebagai contoh, Biak berdarah tahun 1998, Wamena berdarah tahun 2000, Wasior berdarah 2001, Abepura berdarah 2000, dan masih banyak lagi pelanggaran HAM yang tidak diselesaikan oleh negara Indonesia.
Mm-hmm.
No. Until now, the cases of human rights violation in Papua, which were not resolved by the state. For example, bloody Biak in year 2019-98, bloody Wamena 2000, bloody Wasia 2001, bloody Abipura in 2000, and many others also of many other human right violation also has been done.
Hmm. So we will take a short break. When we return, we will talk about how's West Papua after Jokowi's inauguration to be as the new president of Indonesia.
ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hey, we are back again. This is Arlene, and we are continuing our discussion on West Papua, especially the future of West Papua under Jokowi. So to resume our discussion today, I would like to ask more about what is the direction of West Papua under Jokowi. So my question: how do the West Papuan people, especially Papuans in general, receive Jokowi? Is Jokowi committed to ensure the Papuans' rights are protected?
Kami mengharapkan pemerintah Jokowi bisa membuka diri untuk bangsa Papua dengan menyelesaikan masalah Papua melalui meja perundingan damai dengan melibatkan negara lain menjadi pihak ketiga sebagai mediator. Ini merupakan harapan kami kepada pemerintahan Jokowi.
We are expecting government of Jokowi can open up to the people of Papua to resolve the Papuan issue through a peaceful negotiation table involving third party from other country as a mediator, and this is our hope from the Jokowi.
But to be exact, how do the Papuan receive Jokowi? Are they openly accepting him as the new president of Indonesia, or they felt that he will be like other past president which don't really give any space for West Papuans to voice up their view?
Dari segi orang Papua sendiri, bagaimana mereka rasa tentang Jokowi? Ada tak Jokowi akan betul-betul akan menyelesaikan masalah, atau dia pun akan seperti yang presiden-presiden yang dahulu?
Ya, itu menjadi satu harapan kami orang Papua, karena yang pertama ialah Jokowi bukan dari militer, tetapi Jokowi dari sipil, sehingga kami harap Jokowi akan membuka diri untuk berdialog dengan kami orang Papua dalam penyelesaian masalah pelanggaran hak asasi manusia dan penentuan nasib sendiri.
Basically, we hope Jokowi, since Jokowi is not from the military and is from the civil, so we hope that he will be able to look into the human right issue, the human right violation more genuinely.
Yeah, so they are much more positive because he's not part of the military. He doesn't have that military connection, and he's just a normal person having a very normal life. Then, I mean, he worked hard to be the president of Indonesia, so they are positive about him on that particular matter, I suppose.
Okay, jadi yang mengikut jawapan kamu tadi, jadi orang Papua lebih positif lah sebab Jokowi dari orang biasa, dia bukan dari militer.
Ya, itu menjadi harapan kami.
That is their hope.
Yeah, that's their hope.
Yeah, that's good to hear about it. But nevertheless, even during the presidential election, before the presidential election, even until now, there's very little media attention on Papua. Only the recent news, if I'm not mistaken, I have to add this particular news that I saw a couple of weeks ago, that the issue of two activists, Western activists that journalists that were being jailed because of voicing out against the Papuan issue. So in reality, it's very, very rare to actually even hear of people talking about this issue. So why there is very, very, very little media attention?
Ya, perhatian di media di Papua sangat sedikit karena pemerintah tidak mengizinkan akses terbuka luas untuk Papua. Dan kami berharap untuk ada lembaga internasional dan jurnalis internasional yang datang ke Papua Barat untuk melihat secara langsung kondisi di Papua.
Yeah, basically the attention of the media in Papua is very little, as the government do not allow wide open access to Papua. And we are hoping for international institute or journalists to come to West Papua to see firsthand of the condition of the Papuan people.
And I want to ask you, Adrian Pereira, because it seems like the people in Papua can only like hope or wish that the media would give their attention to this particular area and the issues that they are facing. In reality, is there other reason or in the bigger picture, if I wanna just give that particular framework, why the media attention has been absent altogether?
Basically, if you look at the Southeast Asian region, there are few places which have a quite heavy conflict, and of course, these are the self-determination movements. Besides West Papua, we also can see the region of Patani, which is just our neighbor. It's a few hours away, and very seldom do we hear news of these areas. So it's not just a problem with the media not having access due to these areas being geographically far from the center or the state, the head of state. But I think there are certain policies at the national level and even at the ASEAN level which prevents journalists, either local or international, from covering these areas, since self-determination has always been a very sensitive issue, and with the extremely high and violence that happens, I think no government would want their country to be put in a very negative limelight. But if you look at West Papua, they have very strict rules for journalists, especially international journalists. Like you mentioned, the 2 French journalists were actually jailed, and it's a very complex procedure for international journalists to get access into West Papua. In fact, even international human rights organizations it's almost impossible for them to get into West Papua because the government basically does not want human rights reports on the violations to be exposed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In fact, the story of that 2 French journalists is not even reported in almost all the Southeast Asian media. If I'm not mistaken, I actually gained access of that news in a website that is not a news website.
Yes, and of course, even since it was established, ASEAN has a very quite a mind-boggling policy which is called non-interference. So, of course, this contradicts with the notion of all human rights. All human rights should apply to all, regardless of whatever boundary, and whenever there's a violation, others must intervene or should intervene. But due to the nature of the state, which has its sovereignty, so governments basically say don't interfere, and especially don't send your media to come and cover these types of news.
Mm-hmm. So with that, I'm sure when it comes to the younger generation, they might have a different kind of struggle. So what are the aspirations and concerns of the younger generation when it comes to the future of Papua?
Ya, aspirasi dan keprihatinan kami kaum muda di Papua adalah bagaimana pemerintah bisa membuka diri untuk menyelesaikan masalah Papua secara jujur, adil dan bermartabat sesuai dengan isu pelanggaran hak asasi manusia di Papua untuk penentuan nasib sendiri.
Okay. The aspiration and the concern of young people in Papua is how the government can open up to resolve Papuan issue honestly, fairly and with dignity, on par in tackling the issue of the human right violation in regards to self-determination.
So, Anne, I want to ask you, maybe you can convey this question to Maurits as well, which is what kind of activity or activism that the younger generation of Papuans have done, because I'm sure they want to move away from the direction of taking arms and all that.
Okay. soalan seterusnya tu, apakah aktiviti-aktiviti yang dilakukan oleh kaum muda untuk aspirasi yang kamu sebut tu, dan yang tidak, yang apa tu, tidak, supaya mereka tidak mengambil yang senjata lah, cara bersenjata. Apakah aktiviti-aktiviti yang dilakukan oleh anak-anak muda di Papua?
Ya, aktivitas yang mereka lakukan di Papua ialah generasi muda Papua. Mereka sudah komitmen untuk berjuang untuk merdeka dengan cara-cara damai dan sesuai dengan mekanisme internasional, di mana mereka terorganisir rapi dengan berbagai organisasi-organisasi yang menuntut hak-hak orang Papua, baik dari semua aspek. Dan salah satunya ialah Komite Nasional yang mempunyai peranan penting, di mana di dalamnya banyak orang muda yang dibagi untuk berjuang di dalam negeri dan diplomasi internasional.
Okay. Basically, the young people are committed to the activity that they do is basically they are committed to continue the aspiration in a peaceful way, and also to network with other NGOs and civil society, and also to have they have a committee, national committee, which is have a lot of young people involved in the national committee to do a lobby within the country and also internationally.
Interesting. I want to ask you, Adrian, because when it comes to the younger generation of in regions where they want to have self-determination of their own particular area, do you think there's a shift of, from taking arms to having more peaceful means of doing activism, like, for example, dialogues or reaching out to the international community and all that?
If you look at the ASEAN plans for 2015, they've planned to form this huge community where economic, social, cultural, and even political security is integrated into one big system. So in that sense, with basically the borders between country are kind of a bit loosened or blurred, and with that, it will be very difficult to avoid the topics of self-determination, and ASEAN will have to deal with it. So as you notice, even the young people have taken the strategy to do a lot of cross-border networking, building solidarity, and of course I think Durian ASEAN has played a very important role to give us this space, because it's very rare and not many media stations actually welcome us since we started doing this work with this very marginalized, disenfranchised community since 2007. Yep. So trends are changing, it's positive, but everybody has to work a bit harder, and we hope that people will not be, of course, when you have this big ASEAN community, the question of nationalism has to be rethought, because you're not just looking at your own country borders, but in a globalized setup. Yeah. So.
So the question of nationalism and also the question of ASEAN integration, it should be more than just economic integration. It should be also trying to reinterpret what is it being ASEAN is all about. And I want to ask Maurits, which is, what do you think of ASEAN integration 2015? Would it be a good progress for human rights in Southeast Asia, in particular the region of West Papua?
Ya, saya pikir integrasi ASEAN pada tahun 2015 merupakan satu langkah maju untuk penyelesaian pelanggaran hak asasi manusia di ASEAN, dan kami berharap untuk isu pelanggaran hak asasi manusia di Papua akan menjadi salah satu topik utama dalam integrasi ASEAN tahun 2015. Dan Indonesia sebagai negara anggota ASEAN dan PBB harus taat kepada semua keputusan internasional tentang hak asasi manusia.
I think the integration of ASEAN in 2015 is a great great step forward for the settlement of human rights violation in ASEAN, and we are looking forward to the issue of human rights violation in Papua will be one of the main topic in the ASEAN integration in 2015. And Indonesia, as a member of ASEAN and UN, should respect all the international decision in regards of human rights.
Same question to you as well. What do you think about ASEAN integration 2015? Would it be a good progress for human rights in this region?
Actually, it's if you look at the process of which this system was implemented, I think it's actually quite detrimental in terms of human rights, because the very basics of non-consultation in terms of the larger majority of people did not happen. So I remember going for these ASEAN People's Forum meetings, and civil society is like given a symbolic 5 minutes with government leaders and officials
During the ASEAN summit.
Yes, but at the same time, we found out that the business sector or the private sector has had many rounds of negotiations and have finalized many agreements since in the past years building up to this ASEAN economic or ASEAN community. So basically, the ASEAN governments, probably out of desperation for economic to build a better economy for the region, have decided to implement this whole big one economic system. So these are signs that are not so positive. It's a bit worrying as a human rights activist. So I think everyone should be vigilant. And
so you're not against business or ASEAN focusing its main aspect or component of ASEAN integration and on economy, but it seems like the way it is being put into priority is a bit biased, that they don't see that the larger picture is also about the human beings behind all this economic activity. Would that be the case?
Definitely, because I mean, we are now competing in a globalized world, and ASEAN wants to have a big piece of the pie, but of course it should not neglect the human rights of its people in this process. And of course, as we all know, the pie doesn't grow as fast as it should, and it's not distributed equally, and I think ASEAN leaders should look at this very seriously.
Any last comments that you want to add before we wrap things up about West Papua?
Okay, ada komen-komen yang akhir sebelum kita selesaikan temu duka ni?
Kami mewakili masyarakat rakyat Papua. Kami sangat mengharapkan dukungan dari 10 negara ASEAN kepada Papua Barat dalam mengangkat isu-isu pelanggaran hak asasi manusia di Papua, dan terutama penentuan nasib sendiri di forum-forum resmi ASEAN.
We, the Papuan people, hope to see the 10 country of the ASEAN in taking up the issue of the human right violation in ASEAN in the forum in ASEAN level.
So with that, that's the end of our discussion today. I hope that when you come back, when you return back to Indonesia, at least there is something more to be done, especially when it comes to human rights issue. And with us, Malaysia, as the chairman of ASEAN next year or in a couple of months, I hope that we can take up this issue seriously as well.
Thank you, Arlene.